And we are staying on top of
Responders
this
are good
breaking
about
news.
talking
One of my
tactics and
officers was
facts.
shot.
It's the emotional scars that they want to hide. The details of their incidents and their physical injuries are unique to them, but the aftermath and the psychological injuries are shared and recognizable to responders across the country. These responders chose not to hide. They want you to know that you are not alone, you are not weak, you are not broken. From being shot to being the one that had to take the shot and everything in between. We chose to focus not on the incidents themselves, but instead on what happens next. All of us hope that their stories inspire you to start the conversation. In your place of worship, with your therapist, whatever you choose, celebrate your story, acknowledge your injuries, but most importantly, lead the conversation. So I think the other piece that's really important for us to have a conversation about and to really start the conversation around is hearing from family members. Law enforcement, emergency responders, it's a tough job for those who are in it and for those who are also family members to the ones who are putting their lives on the line. And we'll run through the introductions of who everyone is. I'm Dr. Sarah Metz with Code 4 Counseling, and I'm also married to Chief Nick Metz of the Aurora Police Department.
I'm Christine Bright. I work for the Douglas County Sheriff's Office. I've worked there for 19 years. I'm married to Dan Bright.
I'm Ashley Bright. I am the daughter of Dan and Christine Bright.
I'm Stephanie Durrell, and I'm a deputy with Douglas County Sheriff's Office. I've been with them for a deputy for about 6 years, and I am married to Ronnie Durrell.
My name's Wendy Ortiz. I'm the wife of Sergeant Eric Ortiz, who works at the Aurora Police Department.
I'm Alicia Romero, and I am the wife of Ricky Romero, who is with Aurora Police Department.
So I'm going to first start with you. So tell us a little bit about kind of what you were envisioning and what you're wanting to see.
Sure. Well, Dan and I have been in law enforcement almost 20 years each. So we've seen how we grew up and the training that we've had or haven't had in taking care of ourselves is lacking, and taking care of each other and family members is lacking. And after Dan's critical incident in September of 2016, we didn't really know that it would go this way. We didn't know what our journey was going to look like, but we also saw other people hurting in that time, not only because of Dan's incident, but obviously there were other critical incidents in between, and we tried to help each individual family with what we had and the knowledge that we had, but we realized that it was going to be bigger than just us, and we needed help. And what that looks like now is we want to educate first responders into mental health awareness.
Which is awesome. And I think it does kind of come from being in this for a long time, and I think we have seen a shift in how these conversations are had.
I see a lot more officers and their families taking advantage of psych services, speaking to all of their peers and their friends about going through those things, and utilizing the services has been really beneficial. I think I've seen that a lot more in the last couple of years.
One of the pieces that we heard the guys talk about was that they don't always want to come home and tell their families what their day at work was, whether it was a critical incident or whether it was just rough call. Is that something, I know Ronnie actually talked a lot about it and was really able to admit that he didn't tell you a lot about his experiences. Would you agree?
I guess agree and disagree. I felt like he was giving me a lot of information of what happened and what was going on. I don't think he was telling me so much of what he was actually dealing with emotionally. So I think that's where he kept a lot of it out. So, but being a first responder as well, coming home to another first responder, you maybe can have more of that conversation of what a bad day looks like, what a bad call looks like, where to maybe somebody else it's a little bit harder, for a spouse or significant other, whoever is not in this job.
Wendy, how about for you? Did Eric talk a lot about his experience, kind of the emotional experience, what happened on the job?
No, Eric's a pretty quiet guy, and he doesn't share a lot, and I'm the type of person who communicates a little bit more and want that information. And I think a lot of it is him trying to protect me and our kids, and I think it helps us have a stronger bond. I yearn for that communication and want to know, and I know I can handle what he tells me, And so sometimes that can be a little bit of a challenge for us in that I think that spouses and significant others can handle more than what I think the first responder gives them credit for.
You're nodding, you're like, yes.
Absolutely. Absolutely. And I think that it's not just the spouses too. In very kid appropriate terms, I think our kids can handle it, and having those conversations with our kids and with your spouses makes your family more resilient when something does happen too, because those things are already built in place. I think that it's really good.
Tell us a little bit about your experience with that. Do you hear many of the details? Do you mind hearing the details?
No, not really. With my dad, he's very closed off, does not talk about it, and I never really ask him, but my stepmom will come home and she's like, oh, this happened today, and it's kind of, I don't want to say cool, but it's just like an inside view.
Yeah.
Because, you know, when you have family in law enforcement, at least my opinion of it was bad guys can't touch you because you're on the good guy side. So hearing a little bit from you and what the real world is like is kind of, it just helped a little bit.
So it was more empowering. It didn't scare you.
Yeah,
It
not
almost
really,
more,
but I
yeah.
mean, she, you know, it's not like I was 10 years old and she was coming
right.
home and she's like, hey, it was, you know, as I got older, and I would ask her questions because she, like, you make me feel comfortable when I ask questions, like if I don't understand something. So, but with my father, it's a little more difficult for him, even before his incident. So,
When was that first time that each of you kind of felt like something's wrong with my person and I don't know how to reach them?
I think it's when the stories, kind of like you said, started going from facts and emotions into just facts. And I realized that he wasn't dealing with the emotion part of it. He was just relaying everything in facts. And then it went from that to nothing.
I think for me, I really didn't notice it until after his officer-involved shooting. Obviously, it changed our lives, and we had to figure out what a new normal was. But his anger, his irritability, he was just mad all the time. But now when I look back at it, I can see signs from years ago, before his OIS, that, and him to me as well, he probably has seen some signs. I'm more apt to talk about it and tell him I was
Clean it out
sad
as you go.
about it.
Yeah.
I can clean, I can decon is what I would
Yeah.
say. And so now I look back on all the years, we've been married 16 years, and I go, that was probably a time where he needed to really clean that out, and he never did.
Yeah.
A lot of the same things as Christine. It was a lot of the anger and irritability with very simple, or we could say stupid things, just why is that such a big deal? But at the time, I don't think he realized that it was because of all these emotions he was feeling and that he did not want to let them out. He especially would tell me he didn't want to let it out in front of me or the kids. Whether that he felt like it made him a weaker person or I don't know, we just never have truly had that full conversation. But I know that that was one of the things for him, is not really knowing, I think, where all of that anger and irritability was coming from. So,
Same for Eric, some anger?
I would say more frustration with us, with the kids, with me. Easier to have a fight, easier to snap at the kids about something that didn't seem reasonable.
getting angry over spilled milk is, I
Yes.
think, the best
Literally.
way.
Literally over
It's
spilled
so
milk.
true. It's so true.
Yeah.
It could be water, milk, whatever.
Yep, absolutely.
It's the kid or somebody spilled, and it was, tenfold over an accident.
Huge blow up.
Yeah, and you brought up a good point in that I think we hear from them all the time when they come into my office. I hear from them all the time that they don't want to seem weak. They don't want to tell you guys because they, A, don't want to stress you out, and B, they don't want to seem weak. So to your officers, but also to others who might be watching this, what do you say to that, to the ones who think that they will come off as weak if they say that they're struggling?
I think it takes a much stronger person to come forward and say they're hurting than to pretend they're not. I think there's much more honor and strength in seeking help.
And there was a lot more damage done when he wasn't seeking help than afterwards, because there was a lot of yelling at the kids, a lot of yelling at me, and breaking a lot of friendships because of it. So I think that getting that help really helps.
So when you say help, again, that looks different for different people. Sometimes it is going to psych services, going to a therapist, sometimes it's faith, sometimes it's peer group. What do you feel like has been the most helpful for your family in managing the stress of the job?
I don't know about you guys. For my family, it was a little bit of everything. We kind of send our kids to psych services. We go to psych services and just do touch-ups. But then faith is a huge piece of our family, and so that really ties us together, gives us good solid connections. And then our friends and our family are huge. Almost everybody in our circle is law enforcement, so it's easy to speak to them about different things. They understand it. My dad is a retired Denver police officer, and now he's seeing the trauma at the end of it too. All of those things kind of coming up at the retirement phase and dealing with some of those things. So I think it's good to get perspectives from all those walks of life.
I think where we're different, or where our situation was a little bit different, is I feel like when Eric had his critical incident, we kind of got scooped up by all of it. We got, psych services came in, we reached out for mental health help for Eric, and one of my daughters was really struggling, and so we spent a lot of time with counseling with her. But friends and family were amazing, and those were law enforcement friends and non-law enforcement friends. Everybody, it's amazing how you see so many people. I think one of the officers spoke to this, just so many people who come out of the woodwork who really are your true, genuine friends. And we really leaned into our faith a lot. Eric reached out to our pastor, and they've had a lot of connection and a lot of talks. And so I feel like we kind of just got wrapped up in a blanket, and I think that's what's helped us do so well.
I think for us, Ronnie really focused on kind of that blue family, and that's where he felt most comfortable. He unfortunately has been through 2 critical incidents in a very short amount of time, and that was his go-to, was he wanted to talk to his brothers and sisters in blue, and that's where he felt comfortable, and there was nothing wrong with that. It just came to a point where you need more, you have to do something else. It's not working because it's not changing what's happening at home. In our family life. And so for him, it came to a point where he was like, okay, this is what I need to do. And I would encourage people to not wait until a certain point, that you really have to kind of just jump in with your feet in and just take as much as you can.
My girls also had psych services after Dan's critical incident, and children are very resilient, and I think my biggest fear was how they're gonna treat their dad after, and now that he's in a wheelchair, and what does that look like? And I can't, go and take a walk with him, and I can't do this and I can't do that. I didn't want them to think that way. So they went for a long time, and I don't know how Ashley felt about going.
It definitely helped in some ways. There were some things that I felt she just couldn't necessarily understand, because I felt like she wasn't within that realm, if that makes any sense. But I mean, it did help having someone to just say, like, I don't understand what's going on, and she could kind of walk me through it a little bit and help me out that way.
Kind of normalize your reactions and things.
Yeah, so that helped a lot, and it was really nice. But I think what I liked most was just being around you guys and everyone else, and just because they all experienced the same thing. Yeah, like we were all going through it together. So
what would you guys say now, everything that you guys have been through with your loved ones, to new family members who are just starting the academy and who are scared out of their mind about taking this journey? Is it worth it? What do you guys think?
Oh, it's definitely worth it. It's hard. I mean, it's different for me because I'm also law enforcement, so I'm in that kind of family piece of it, so I know what to expect. I think that to educate your brothers and your sisters and your moms and dads, you got to educate them. You got to let them know that you may be, working on birthdays and anniversaries and on Christmas, and I can't go to dinner here, and I got to work weekends. So a lot of times the families don't know what they're really getting into. And they assume that their son's going to be there for Easter when in fact, he actually has to work, or he gets called out.
He said he's going to be home at 6, and they actually are going to be home at 6, which never. Yeah, that's not a thing. That's not a thing.
So to educate, the education that goes on in the academy, to have those family days is super important. So all of the family members know, okay, I know what this looks like, so I'm not going to be surprised later. But as far as being on the job, and it's a different feeling. The family experience that I feel with not just other brothers and sisters of blue, but their families. I also support having wives and spouses and brothers and sisters and parents meet each other.
Yes.
Children also. Have the children meet each other, go to family barbecues, and this is why it's important. If I wasn't a member of the sheriff's office when this occurred, I wouldn't have known anybody, and I would have felt isolated.
I remember that night at the hospital, and this speaks to the bond of the Blue family. Everyone was desperately wanting to take care of you, and you were desperately wanting to make sure everybody else was okay.
Yeah.
And you were, of course, wanting to make sure your husband was okay, but she was, please check on so-and-so, and please check on so-and-so, and you could just see the bond you had with everybody there.
Yeah.
And that's the bond I think that law enforcement has. Yeah. How about for you? What would you say, again, as someone who sees it from that side of being the kid of law enforcement?
Yeah.
Is it worth it? Do you feel like it's...
Oh, yeah.
Yeah?
Yeah,
You
definitely.
still like them?
I do. I love them. Honestly, it's like having a bunch of fun uncles
Yeah.
and aunts and all that kind of stuff. But no, I can agree with what Christine was saying. It was nice walking in and having a group of people that you knew would be there for you. Like, I know Alicia was there, and that was amazing. But yeah, definitely helpful.
She's my emotional kid.
I'm sorry.
She's crying too.
I know. I saw you, and I was like, "Oh God, someone's crying." I can cry.
She's my emotional
It was a hell of a night.
It was crazy. I think Ricky was actually the first person I saw.
Probably.
And this is what it looked like that night.
Yeah.
But it was such a scary night, I know, but it was so cool to see really how many different agencies, all came together, and everybody who knew and loved you guys, and it was just cool to see that.
Yeah.
How about for you? Worth it?
Yes.
Yeah?
I would say I couldn't see myself doing anything else. I knew this is what I always wanted to do. I think just a lot more education and preparedness, because I can tell you that I never would have expected to be where we are at today, myself personally in this job, as well as our family life and where we've kind of come to at this point. In the academies, for the academy people, just to know, like, hey, there's going to be really good days, really bad days, and how do you help your family member through that? How do you talk to people about it? What's available? I wish I would have had that beforehand, and not, again, dealing with the aftermath and the trauma later on in life when it could have been dealt with more at the beginning.
So when Eric and I met and got married, he was already a police officer, so I didn't get to go through the academy with him and meet people, and so it was different. The thing that I cherish is that he was part of a team where we had gotten together with them, and I knew the guys and their wives, and so I had no idea what I was in for when I got the phone call. And I think that the blessing was that I didn't know I had a blue family. But one of the guys that had been on his team that I knew really well was the one that volunteered to come pick me up, and that made a big difference. And Emily was with him too, and those two were amazing. And walking into the hospital, and there were officers lined up as I walked in, and I couldn't walk to the restroom without a police officer walking me to the restroom, and we would
And pee in
go.
the stall next to you. Let's do this together.
We had people guarding our house while we were gone, and I had no idea. I had no idea that all that would come to me. And so I do think it's worth it because my husband loves his job more than anything. And I remember my sister-in-law came up to me after this had all happened, and she looked at me and she said, "Are you going to let him go back to that job?" And I was like, am I going to let him go back to that job? That's his job. That's what he knows and he loves. And so he and I went to breakfast one day, and I said, do you want to keep doing this? Where are you at? And I think he was trying so hard to protect us again when we were doing okay, and he was thinking he was protecting us more. And he said, well, I don't know what to do. I don't want to ever have you and the girls have to go through that again. And I told him, I think that's the only thing, that's the job that you were made for, and that's what makes you happy. And if you want to do that job, you need to do that job. And he loves it. He still loves it to this day, and I will support that as long as he's happy and well.
All right, I'll try and get through mine without crying. I'm not going to look at you. Yeah, this job is so worth it, but it's really a calling. Ricky, I think without the job, I'm more terrified of him going into retirement without the job. But they are called to do it, and he wouldn't know any other way. And I love the family so much that I went from being a cop's kid to a cop's wife. But it is like nothing else, this blue family. Showing up at hospitals the way that we do. I mean, we shut down Parker Adventist. Those poor hospital workers. We shut them down. But we do regular life really well in this family. I mean, when we had our babies, all of his department was there. And when we have birthday parties, it's like cop cars line the streets, just coming to our birthday parties because whoever's on duty can swing by. And it's a family. There's no other way to describe it. You have your regular family, and then you get to pick and choose who you want after that, and we chose well.
So you run the Facebook page for spouses.
I do.
So talk about that a little bit. What do you see spouses needing? What questions do they seem to have? Like when you look at that, I think it's been incredibly valuable. It's a really important thing. I think any department can start something like that.
Absolutely. So we had a hard transition going from a smaller agency like Lone Tree, where, I mean, we knew everybody so well. We saw them all the time, and then incorporating into Aurora, which is huge. And so we lost that connection. And I think small groups like that, whether it's on Facebook or you have events or you have groups, it's hugely beneficial because you need the families to be able to connect.
That's something I think that's really important to help family members understand is you are the first line. You guys are absolutely going to notice those changes in them before they do. They're a tiny bit stubborn. They're right over there, but yes, they're probably hopefully nodding, but yeah, they're stubborn. They don't necessarily notice those things right off the bat. So I think when people come to my office, often say is, I don't know how to help them. They're not noticing it in themselves. I'm pointing it out to them, and they're not appreciating my very good feedback. They don't like that. So what would you guys say to a spouse who says, I don't know what to do? What do I do?
Truly, it has to be their decision to want to do it and want to get the help, because ultimately that's the best way for them to do it. Forcing them to do it sometimes works, sometimes it doesn't. So
And I see a lot of spouses struggling with, you know, the quick tempers and the yelling or snapping at the kids. And so I think some of that, you just have to set boundaries on what you're willing to put up with and what you're not.
Often it's the accumulation of just the day-to-day stuff that comes with this job. So what were some of the other little stuff that you feel like you saw start to pile up?
For Eric, you know, there's just, he'll mention things here and there, and I know, you know, he had to take someone down who had hung themselves, and he had the situation where the guy slit his throat in front of everybody, and those are or seeing a child, and when he mentions those things, I know those are the things that are getting filed and are accumulating. And I think that all officers should, all first responders should have some, I know it's available to them. That's the thing that I want everybody to know, is just know that there's help available, and it's okay to get it.
I think another one of the horrible myths that is out there is that law enforcement marriages most often end in divorce. That you're more likely to get divorced if you're in a law enforcement relationship. 75, 90%, they throw out these kind of statistics, which isn't true, but it keeps getting taught to people. All of you have successful marriages. What do you feel like has worked? What do you feel like has made your marriage successful?
Communication.
Yeah, effective communication.
Effective communication. Yeah.
And I think it's good for my sister and I to see that they have a strong relationship, because that means that we all have a strong relationship. So that's something that I valued a lot, is just having that family time cut out no matter what. So, yeah.
I love that.
Yeah.
If you have dinners together, take that time as your family time. For me and Ronnie, we worked opposite sides of the week pretty much through most of our career, trying to save on daycare, and you know, we kind of each got to raise the kids, but that really took away our time together. So if we had days off or times in the morning, like, it was, what could we do together today? So can we go to the pool for a few hours before one of us goes to work? Can we go to the park? Can we go do something? And I think making the best out of the time you have is really important, especially when you're missing, you know, birthdays and Christmas and all of that stuff. So
It sounds like being really flexible and using whatever time you have and being super flexible, that it's not always going to look like that traditional time.
Our family and our faith are, at the end of the day, the most important thing, and so just pouring our energy into that. Eric and I are a lot stronger after his critical incident, and I don't know that we have a guidebook on what we did, but just maybe having that a little bit of a scare to think, you never know, whether it's in this job or you get in your car and you drive somewhere, that you might not have that person anymore. And so I think that's been our big thing, is just knowing there's something bigger than just what we do. And I'll say too, I there's a lot of protection from the first responders in protecting spouses and family members from all of what they do, but you have to be a really strong person to be belong to a police officer. And so I think that helps a lot too, is that there's strength on all sides.
Instead of living to work, we work to live, and we make family time a big time. We take vacations, we do family dinner when we can. Sometimes we meet him on duty just so that we can have the family time, which is big, but being flexible and finding our way and making each other a priority has been really good.
For those agencies who really are starting from scratch, when you look back on all of the things that have been available to you, where would you say they should start? Where would a spouse start? Or where should an agency start to bring more awareness to mental health?
I think that each agency can hone in on what their top 5 needs are and really educate themselves on those. Build policies, build SOPs on critical incidents, on not just critical incidents, but accumulative traumas that happen.
I think through education, some kind of spousal awareness, like this is the one person if you have questions that you can go ask. Or if you are needing psych services, maybe yourself as a spouse or significant other or even a family member, to say, okay, I can call this number or I can talk to this person to get help. Because a lot of times I think that information doesn't come home to the family.
Yeah, and what I would say too to anyone who does run kind of the social media pages and things like that is educating. We're probably never going to stop the desire of people to go to social media and start posting, because it is it's an outlet for them. That's kind of that first attempt to get their support systems in place. But I think one of the education pieces that we try is letting people know, give us an hour. That's what I tell every agency I work with, is just give us an hour, 1 hour, to notify families. Hopefully, fingers crossed, we can get to family in an hour. And I think giving people that amount of time to say, we know you're going to post and we know you're going to get on social media, but just give us a little bit of time, and helping people understand why we need that so they aren't getting notified on their lunch break.
You get that anxiousness and that anxiety about how do you tell your children what's going on and what happens. Everything was all over the news. I was afraid of what was going to be said at school if they realized the names and the last names and all this stuff. But we just told her. You kind of make it more kid friendly, but and she was kind of like, okay.
Yeah. What was it like for you? How were you told? Did it go well?
Oh no, I won't look at anyone. I won't cry. No, I was actually at work, and I'm not sure who sent Patty, but it was someone that I recognized who worked close with Christy. So they came in and they were like, hey, someone from DCSO is here to get you. And I was like, okay, like, what did I do? Did I do something wrong? And I said, do I need my stuff? There were a lot of unknowns. So I just grabbed all my belongings and I said, okay. And I worked at a preschool at the time. So as soon as I saw Patty, I got a little worried and I was like, okay, what's wrong with Christy? Like, what is wrong? Because I worked there and Addie went to that school. So I was like, they would have come to get us. So I went with her and she just kind of took me in her arm and she goes, she told me, and I didn't want to freak the kids out, so I put my hand over my mouth so I wouldn't scream. And she didn't have a cop car. We were just in like this unmarked car, so she couldn't like speed through the highway or anything. So she's like, well, your dad's shot. And I was like, well, how bad is it? Like, what's going on? And she goes, I really don't know. So I'm like just sitting there kind of like this, just kind of quietly crying, because I'm like, well, I don't know if I should freak out or if I should stay totally calm. Because I'm like, it could have been in the arm, it could have been, still somewhat critical, but not super, super bad. But yeah, it was kind of agony. And I called my mom and called my boyfriend. And I was like, I don't know what's going on, but I'm not coming down this weekend. And as soon as we got to the hospital, I jumped out of the car and I was ready to go, but I didn't know where I was going. So I had to wait for her. And I felt so bad because she was an older gal, so I was trying to speed along and she was trying to keep up, and I was just like, I'm sorry. And then that's when I saw Ricky and I sucked. But and then I saw you, and then everything was fine. So it's okay. This is the first time I've really talked about it since.
It's a big deal. What does it feel like to talk about this?
It gives me anxiety.
Yeah, it's intense.
Yeah. So
I'm really glad you're part of this.
Oh, thanks.
That you're talking. It's hard, and I think that's what we're so wanting to accomplish. Is these are hard conversations to have, and it does require all of you to go back to some tough moments and really reflect on that. And what I love about everything you're saying, and as hard as it is to talk about, I love that when I asked the question before, do you love that your dad and your stepmom's in law enforcement, you still said yes.
Yeah.
You wouldn't change it.
You can see how much they love their job, and I remember telling, friends that I was like, I don't want him to go back. But then I realized how selfish that was because, now all he wants to do is help people in his situation. So that I think is amazing. Like, for him to go through that and want to help other people, even though he knows that it's going to be hard for him some days, I just think that's amazing. So.
And you guys, I think, all kind of identify that this is a calling.
Mm-hmm.
It's a calling for them. It's a calling for their families. And I think the more families recognize it as a calling and see it as a mission, as a family mission, I think those are the families that are the most successful.
It's easier to support.
Absolutely. When you're in it, when you're part of it. Not that it's your whole world, but as soon as it becomes something you identify with and it becomes part of your family, I think it makes it easier.
Yeah.